Well, I'm glad that week's over. Always a unique week, and I say that with obviously triple option and things, but it's different. It's obviously something we do during spring. It's something we do during fall camp. There's always going to be some adjustments. They gave us a lot of different things that I'd say defensively we not say we weren't prepared for, but hadn't practiced as much. But I think all in all, no matter what, on both sides of football, you do find out a lot about yourself after a game with an academy, especially the Naval Academy, and on the road. You find out what you're really made of, because some way, somehow, it's going to be very difficult. And I think we got a false sense of security a couple years ago, just with how the game went and got out of hand and got lopsided quick. And so maybe we didn't find out nearly as much about ourselves, and I mean that in a discipline and our ability to continue to fight and finish because of what it was 3 years ago. But nonetheless, an incredibly challenging game that, as we look at it now, is something that's probably really, really going to help us, because where we'd been challenged before, we hadn't been really put to a test in the fourth quarter when really it's uncomfortable, and you've got to be able to perform in those uncomfortable situations. And whether it just gets down to a 7-point game, they get an onside kick, all those different things. Just hopefully we really look at it as it's an opportunity for us to grow. And we found a way to continue to finish things and win out, and got a really great example from a guy like Arquan Bush, who probably practiced maybe 5, 10, 15 snaps the whole week, played only on field goal block in the game. I think maybe we subbed him in a couple times on field goal block, but stayed locked in, and his ability to be ready when his number was called. That's kind of that competitive spirit that we talked about, and went in there at the end of the game and kind of sealed the deal for us. And so an incredible lesson for us as a program, us as coaches, an example that we'll use for a lifetime, to be honest with you. And now it's time to move on. And we got to continue to do a better job of handling all the things that come along with the successes or the wins, and the attention that we're getting, maybe as an individual and as a program. And so for me, that message will continue to be stay humble and stay hungry.
What do you learn from a fourth quarter like that, where up 17, you maybe had a chance to create some space and ultimately let them crawl back in?
Yeah, I mean, you learn that obviously there's about finish, but I think really no matter what, whether it's there with whoever, when it comes down to that last 2 minutes of the game, you really are going to find out, can guys perform at the highest level when it's really tough. And we say you really find out more about yourself in those adverse situations. And we hadn't had to play in some of those uncomfortable situations. I'm not saying we didn't. Obviously, Indiana was a really tough game and not real, the first 28 minutes. And Notre Dame was an incredible challenge. But when it gets into the fourth quarter, when those situations are like they are, you got to find the guys that are, going to be able to be comfortable. And I mean, play and perform in those really uncomfortable situations. And I think that's what we really kind of found out about ourselves and a lot of different guys.
Did you feel like it was the triple option that gave you trouble? Do you think it was the outside noise and attention? Do you think it was a combination?
No, it's always a unique week. I think the thing that they, more than anything, when you're playing a triple option team and they limit possessions and kind of like we saw with a little bit with Murray State, I think you really got to play complementary football. And if there's one thing that I don't think we did a great job of, is playing complementary football. And when you have opportunities to get 3 and outs, you got to capitalize. When you have opportunities to have short fields, you got to capitalize. And for defensively, if they're going to run 80-some snaps, you got to capitalize on some turnovers and putting the ball on the ground. And those are the things that we did not do a great job of to kind of make the game maybe what we would have liked to have had it. But those are all things you got to learn from, and we will.
Outside of the touchdown drive early, the rushing numbers, you guys handled it pretty well. How did you feel you played against the running attack?
Well, I tell you what, our inside guys, so the Marcus Browns, the Curtis Brooks, those guys that played inside, Briggs, and they did an unbelievable job. And it is, for a lot of people that don't understand and don't know, I won't get into the officiating of things, but it is a really nasty game inside there. And those guys, as much as anything, were the difference in, obviously the rushing attack and even a lot of those minus yardage plays. Those guys were phenomenal. Really, really proud. That's what I mean. You find out a lot about yourself, that those, will you continue to fight? When you have 85 snaps on defense against a triple option, that's not what you're looking for. And those guys did a really, really good job. And really, to be honest, we were sound, much different than we were 3 years ago, even different than it was, 5 years ago, even different than 3 years ago. I think we played more sound. Obviously, the game was much more difficult and, much more challenging just because of the score. But nonetheless, those guys really, really played physical and strong inside.
You mentioned the struggles early. Were you expecting that onside kick after Navy scored that first touchdown?
They call those surprise onside kicks for a reason, because they're a surprise. Again, after the game, I told the guys, or on Sunday, not saying an ambush, but I'm not sure I did a good enough job at really preparing our guys for maybe what we were going to see. And I don't mean the triple option. We prepared for the triple option. We prepared, obviously, what we were going to see, for the offense, what they were going to do. Maybe we didn't play as much, work as much four down stuff. But just not recognizing, this is the highest ranked team to come in since 1984 when they beat South Carolina, and all those things that started to kind of recognize and realize a little bit more come Friday night. I'm like, there might be some things that, I'm not saying we weren't prepared for, but maybe I didn't pound into their heads well enough, and that's what I'm trying to look at for myself. So some of those situations, some of those things, I think they did 3 onside kicks. I'm sure they had a couple fake punts ready for us. They give them credit. They had a great game plan, and they were going to let everything go.
In a game like that, how hard is it to keep the offense from trying to make everything happen on one play because they're sitting on the sidelines?
That's the difficult thing. That's why it's complementary football. That means the whole idea the whole week was about execution and taking the opportunities that are given to you, and that's where we didn't do a good enough job. We get them to 4th down defensively, and we jump offside twice, and we don't make them execute. The times they go for it on 4th down that we don't jump off sides, we stop them. That's execution. That's making them earn everything. If we get an opportunity, you don't get as many series on offense, or sometimes there's a long time in between series because it's a longer drive based on how they play the game. You've got to be able to go in there and execute, and that's what I mean by the greatest example we're going to have is what Arquan Bush did. Is to be really ready when your number is called. Here's a guy that didn't really practice much because we weren't in nickel, and maybe he played some corner. You get into a game and there's a guy, I'm being honest, he was on the sidelines asking to call every single snap like he was playing. And one opportunity, or the little opportunity that he gets, he goes in there, makes a play to win a football game. Those kinds of things that we can learn from, I think, both sides of the ball.
Are you going to use that game as just an example of kind of speaking back to 2 questions ago? Teams are going to throw stuff out you haven't seen. There's a bigger target on your back. You're going to get a different environment when you go places. Is that kind of one of the things you're going to use as a teaching lesson?
Yeah, it really kind of, for us, got to kind of go back to the focus has still got to be on us. If you prepare all week worried about what somebody's going to do different because, oh no, what do they really expect and what do they think they got to do to win a football game? It's really difficult. It's hard to get your guys prepared. So more than anything, hey, in this situation where we are, and I think we're going to have to hone ourselves in and figure out who exactly are we. We know who we are. Let's continue to be who we are and make sure we're focused upon ourselves. And a lot of the situations are going to be adjustments when it comes to game time.
In terms of super seniors, Kobe's gotten a lot of attention, Beavers, even Curtis past couple weeks. Joel had a big game against Navy. He kind of doesn't get mentioned with those guys as much. How have you seen his development, not only from last year to this year, but just in general? He's
done a great job, and it's kind of hard because, in that situation, Joel has done an unbelievable job. Wilson Huber is kind of playing behind him and playing, substituting in with him a bit more. Last week was difficult to do because you haven't seen a whole lot of things, and it was hard because, Joel is a guy that got a good feel of the game. He was in the right place, playing really well. There's just times where guys are going to get overlooked, and then all of a sudden you look at the stat sheet and you say, 15 tackles or something like that, which, is kind of unheard of. But he is all around doing a really good job at, playing the game, taking his game from what he was last year, I believe, to another level.
You were a pretty intense guy when you played. Do you see any?
You weren't even alive when I was playing, were you?
I was.
Alive.
I know you were. You were in college when I was diapers.
Do you see a kinship between the way Joel plays and the way
I was down there where the men really play. So sometimes I say those guys behind, they don't really understand until they put their hand on the ground and get down in there. So I don't know. It's hard to compare, you know. But those guys that I think that, you know, maximize who they are, use every ounce of ability that they're given and play above their God-given ability levels. If I can be compared to those kinds of guys like that, then I'm in a really good place.
You used to tell Vrabel that about playing linebacker?
He played D-line in college. That's why he is who he is. And then he got pretty and moved back there in the NFL so he could play longer.
Looking ahead to Tulane, you're going to face another team with not a great record, but they'll have the home crowd behind them, and they'll come in looking to topple everything you've built. Is that going to be a part of the message this week to make sure you guys don't look over this team?
It's always key to know what you're walking into. And, you know, I think that's where the maturity of our program's got to take over. Not just handling the outside things, but knowing what every week we're going to walk into. And there's some things that you're unknown. But, you know, it's a football team that, you know, pop on game one and watch them play against Oklahoma, and they got a chance to win the football game. And, you know, sometimes things don't go their way, and maybe in the last few weeks have not gone their way, but, you know, they're still scary. They're an offense scoring 31 points a game, and, you know, in the situation in which they're in, they're going to be, you know, free-spirited, knowing that they're going to be, you know, able to do a lot of different things and take some chances and shots. And that's why I'm saying for us, we got to focus on ourselves. We got to make sure we're mature enough to realize what it is that we're going to be walking into. And we don't always know what that is, meaning I don't know what the crowd's going to be like. Maybe the crowd's going to be really, really crazy and it's going to be hard for our guys to hear. Or you might go in there like last week and they didn't play any music in pregame. I mean, it was, you know, it was a little different. And I think no matter what, as a competitor, you got to go in, make sure you focus on yourself and know what to expect and prepare yourself that way.
You talk about how nasty it gets at the line of scrimmage against Navy. Is there any concern the following week of a little hangover from that?
Well, I mean, if you really look at the history of playing a triple option team, it's the week after that a lot of times those teams have bigger problems. And, you know, not because they're dinged up or hurt at times. It's just, you know, whatever it is that you normally do, you go away from everything. So, you know, that's where you're going to rely upon the Joel Blancos of the world and the Majay Sanders and the Darian Beavers who have played a lot of football that, hey, when Sunday hit, once Saturday at 4:30 was, I mean, I'm not saying we didn't watch the game film and get a lot of things from it, but it's like, put that thing behind you now. Make sure we get our minds back into how we play defensively. And so sometimes it's more of that where you got to rely upon, you know, the experiences that you've had.
Luke, it sounds like you've got such an experienced team. You guys have won so much the last couple of years, but it sounds like what you're describing is sort of almost like the next step for your team, like understanding, okay, now you've reached this level, but, you know, but now you have to learn to sort of what it means to, like, be at this level in different circumstances. I don't know if that was a great
No,
question,
it is.
but
I think
like that's the next evolution here.
there is some steps to that, and you know, I think that's biggest for the coaches as well, and what we can prepare our guys to be ready for, you know, and as a coach, you can get overblown into thinking like, okay, what are they going to do? Okay, well, I heard about this. I heard that, you know, and all of a sudden you start preparing them for all these different things, and you forget about what's the most important thing. Let's take care of ourselves first and foremost. Let's make sure, you know, that we know what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. Now, you get into a game when you got to make some adjustments. You got to rely upon, you know, the experiences that you have, the ability to communicate with those guys, and make some adjustments in game as opposed to thinking you're preparing for every single thing. That's where I feel we did a good job last week, you know, defensively when we got into the game of making some adjustments on what they were giving us. We had not probably practiced the flexed out motions is one bit of what they had given us. And we had the ability to adjust and adapt and you know, wasn't maybe what we would have loved to have done, but our guys were able to communicate, talk, make some adjustments and not put ourselves in a really tough situation because there were some things we hadn't done. So is that going to happen every week? You don't know, but I think the maturity to be able to prepare, give them what we're going to work on, knowing that when the game ball's kicked off, we might have to make some adjustments and rely upon these guys to understand what that is.
It seems like we talk about Deshaun Pace every week, and rightfully so, making all these big plays that field goal block this game. Is that, recruiting-wise, is that what you sell to kids from around here? I mean, that you can be a big-time player that quick here?
I mean, it's obviously nice when they've got examples. He's doing a great job, and you know, whether that's a kid from around here, whether that's a kid from not from around here, I think the idea is that you're seeing guys that are getting notoriety, you're seeing guys that are making plays, and really you're seeing guys at a young age that are having opportunities, you know. And I think for us more than anything, you know, they're seeing, hey, there's guys at a young age, not just, I mean, Sean Pace might even be listed as a starter, but obviously he's playing a lot and playing, you know, majority of the time, this, that, and other thing, at a young age. So I think it's an example of not just a hometown kid, but a guy who's a young kid that's getting an opportunity in shining. And you know, if you're at some places where maybe you don't get those opportunities as a young kid, I mean, you go back to Ahmad Gardner. You know, a lot of places he probably wouldn't have got an opportunity at 162 pounds as a true freshman to get put into a game. But I think that's the way we want to do things, the ability to play more guys, get guys opportunities to legitimately get experience playing the game, and you find out a lot more about them. You know, and I'm not saying they're the same person, but you're finding out when you put guys into games, you know, those guys that have some of that it factor, and the game's not too big for them, they can kind of slow it down their mind and let their abilities take over.
Wiley said Saturday that
You
I haven't
talked to
gotten as
Wiley?
many looks.
We let Wiley talk?
We did. He said,
For the first time? Okay.
he said, I'm not getting as many looks as I thought I would get this year, but I'm not
From
trying
who?
to focus on that.
The girls
I'm
on
trying to
campus
focus
or
on
what?
He said he wants to focus on being where Dez needs him to be, and Dez will find him the ball. Had you had to have any conversations with Josh just to make sure his head's where it needs to be, despite his numbers maybe not being what we thought they would be?
No, I don't worry about Josh in between the white lines when he's in this building. You know, if he's worried about looks outside on campus, that's genetics, man. He's got to take care of that stuff himself. Maybe he should find some of that style that you guys keep talking about that I harass him about. But he's where he's supposed to be, and you know, I always remind, whether it's him or the guys on this team, you know, or our team, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. You know, and those guys that mature, those guys that are grinders, those guys that are workers, you know, they finish really well, because no matter what the situation has happened, they find ways to continue to grow and get better. And I believe that's who Josh is. And whether that means that he all of a sudden finds the right spot and the ball finds him, it's amazing. When the better you work, the more you don't worry about it, the more that thing will find you.
Cole obviously couldn't go Saturday, but how does what Lowry and Bales did impact field goal kicking going
I
forward?
think it just makes a greater competition. You know, that's what we said we were doing last week. Now, we don't announce it and publicize it all the time, but we want those guys to be in competition, and we'll do the same thing starting today. You know, go out there, we'll chart every single kick, you know, and make it a competition, and go with whoever's, you know, doing the best. And to me, that's the best way you can do it. That's, you know, the way it should always be done. That's not always how it's done. Once a guy gets into a groove in a situation, you don't want to think he's got pressure on him, but you know, that position in particular, anytime you go out there, there's pressure. And so I think for us, especially for those younger guys, it's great to have some competition, that they put some pressure on them during the week, so they're used to it when it comes on Saturday.
You put out players of the game every week. There wasn't anyone for special teams this week. Was that deliberate?
No?
Care to elaborate?
No.
Any more questions?
Good.
Thanks.
He doesn't maybe.